What's up everyone, it's your FPL Thinking Cap Benji and welcome back to another episode of Meta Moves. In this one, I'll be discussing what to do with Bruno after his red card, whether Nico Jackson is actually a sell. I'll also touch on two premium attackers who are short-term punts with big game potential, and then we'll finish up on some Crystal Palace assets who I expect to enter into the meta. Thinking Cap activated. So I've heard a lot of talk about three players and their respective minute projections for the upcoming weeks. Let's begin with Foden, who started 9 league games. In 7 of those, he's played the full 90 minutes. So in terms of early substitutions and rotation, I don't think it's that big of an issue with Foden until Ipswich away in game week 22, because 3 days later, Man City play away to PSG. So I'm predicting secure Foden minutes from game week 19, that's Leicester away, all the way until game week 21, which is Brentford away. So for me, I think Pep and that City team will definitely need to build momentum using the next few league fixtures heading into the Champions League rounds, because they haven't qualified yet and they need to go full strength to do so. City have an amazing spacing between games, and Foden I think has no chance playing that FA Cup first round tie against Salford, which suggests you'll be getting a fully rested Foden for this nice City patch. Still, Foden is a very short-term move, but I think he's got serious attacking upside and he's a potential captaincy option in game week 20. So overall, good expected minutes for the next 3, low-owned premium attacker, and someone I'm very much considering for my own team this weekend. We're going to dive deeper on Foden in the next section, but the other player I wanted to fit in with the scheduled discussion was Ollie Watkins. I did discuss my thoughts on him last episode, and I said that he need a lot for him to be a genuine consideration in 19. Well, that lot did happen, because John Duran, who's been starting ahead of Watkins, he was sent off for violent conduct, and he's going to miss the next 2 league fixtures, which is Brighton at home and Leicester at home, which means Watkins is now looking very, very likely to start 2 out of 2 for Aston Villa in the league. And considering the spacing of games, Aston Villa have 3 or more days recovery between Brighton and Leicester, so I do think it's a really secure punt. Watkins isn't injured, he's been coming on off the bench, moving fine, looking decent, but I think there's something bigger going on between Watkins and Emery, something in the dressing room, but I'm expecting those issues to be ironed out, and therefore Watkins' 2 starts looks really, really likely. And the question is he actually worth it? Because after those 2 games, we've got no guarantee on Ollie's long-term reliability as an asset. Will Emery continue to start him? Will Duran come back in? Nobody knows the answers to those questions. So yes, for the next 2, Watkins looks great, but longer term, he doesn't have that potential just to sit on him, and for me, that does regress his overall appeal. More to come on Watkins later in the video, but let's touch on Nico Jackson now, because there's a lot of chatter around potential rotation for this Ipswich game, but the thing is, almost every Chelsea fan that I've spoken to, they tell me that Maresca doesn't really rate Nkunku in the 9 because he doesn't do the dirty work like Nico does in terms of pressing, pulling defenders to create space for central attackers, etc., because they lost against Fulham. I do think that Nico's likely to start, and I guess that's what the overarching consensus is on Nico, that he'll probably likely start that Ipswich game, because Chelsea have a 4-day turnaround rather than a 3-day turnaround, which is what they had the last time Jackson got rotated away to Southampton. They only had 3 days, now they got 4. So I do think there's still a genuine chance that Jackson does miss out, and that's because of the yellow card situation. Maresca could view team selection from the perspective of, hey, we'll be able to win away to Ipswich even without Nico starting, and the fact that he's on 4 yellows. If he does get booked against Ipswich, he'll miss Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, which will be a much tougher test. So from that way, I do think that Jackson could potentially get rotated, but either way, it just doesn't feel right selling Jackson before Ipswich, especially because he's probably likely going to start. I think it's probably like 70-30 in terms of for Jackson to start, so I think I'll be keeping him this weekend. Let's see what happens. Other areas of the fixture timetable: Arsenal, Liverpool, and Spurs' schedules relax slightly in this coming week, but after that, those 3 teams have the most congestion. Spurs assets, like last week, are a no-go for me because they're dealing with an insane amount of injuries, and with even more tight turnarounds coming, I wouldn't be investing any money in Tottenham players. Sorry, Spurs fans. Arsenal, I do think you could choose to drop one of your Arsenal assets for this upcoming run, but would I be surprised to see Arsenal win 4 out of 4 of the next ones in the league? Absolutely not. Why? Because they're statistically one of the best teams in the league. Double Arsenal defense, I'd definitely hold, or even consider buying if you only got one. Bruno, sent off at Molineux and suspended for Newcastle in 19. On top of that, the game that he's actually going to be available for is the worst one in this run, Liverpool at Anfield, which does beg the question, if you do own Bruno, do you sell him now? First, I think it does depend on your own team. It's definitely highly team dependent. If you're in a position where you don't have that many free transfers, but let's say you've got excellent squad depth, maybe you've got a Rodgers or an Enzo and you're benching him this week, then yeah, in that case, I would highly consider keeping Bruno if you can do it, because the fixtures turn good in Game Week 21 and you're probably going to want him back anyways for that Southampton fixture. But I'm sure there's a ton of you who aren't in that position, and maybe you're sick of the side of Bruno. Well, if you can, I think looking to move to Phil Foden, the entrance this week is really, really appealing if you can afford it. In terms of the next three fixtures, I don't think you can get any better from the options on this list. Leicester away, West Ham at home, and then away to Brentford in 21. Just a great run all round for Foden, and he's been passing my personal eye test recently. Like I said last video, he's looking a lot more involved, and honestly, I think he was pretty unlucky not to walk away with a return versus Everton. In terms of underlying data, Foden's season output has been extremely disappointing, but his non-pen XGI per 90 is actually the best on this tier list, which does suggest he can do the business to deliver at his price point. Foden's post-shot XG is lower than some of the budget options, but it's still higher than the likes of Bruno and Odegaard, so in terms of finishing quality, his numbers are still there, is still decent, definitely a lot of room for improvement, but with the good attacking fixtures coming up, that's what my expectations are with Foden improvement. He's also in this week's captaincy shortlist for best cap. I do my weekly best captain video. I'm sure you guys have seen it. If you don't, make sure you subscribe so you can catch it out. It's probably coming later today. He's a great option, Foden, serious candidate for the armband across the next three, and he could be the key for you guys climbing in your mini league across the next few. But let's not get it twisted, guys. He's a short-term punt, 3 game week option, maybe 4 game week option if he's looking likely to start Ipswich. But either way, you've got to look at Foden with a short-term perspective, because seriously, I don't think and I don't believe his long-term minutes to be strong enough to have him in the long-term FPL meta. But for the month, he's definitely situated comfortably at the top of the personal power curve. Obviously, Odegaard is another player you should consider. His data has seen a few upticks after that Ipswich game. Small rises to Odegaard's non-pen XGI, but if you don't have the trust with Arsenal's attack, maybe a Crystal Palace attacker is the one for you. Entrance point with Southampton at home is really nice. Obviously, my favorite is Ismail Assar, just comparing his dataset with the other mids in all price categories, and right now, he's 100% in the power curve. Great minutes, great data, with the only concern being the lack of set piece share, which the likes of Eze, Gordon, and Enzo Fernandez all have. Gordon is a really interesting one because he seems to be returning to that impressive form we saw last season. He's returned in each of his last 3 weeks, and Newcastle's attacking team data has jumped up into the top 3 teams in the league from an open play XG accumulated perspective. So yeah, look, I get that they've just played Leicester, Ipswich, and a 10-man Aston Villa, but they were still, bottom 10 attack from open play XG a few weeks ago, and to see them so high now means we shouldn't be sleeping on Newcastle's attack, considering most people also own Isak now. Gordon is really the one that allows you to profit big time from Newcastle's attack if they score like 3 or 4 goals, but I do personally prefer Ismail Assar because he's excellent value for money, and in my opinion, he has better fixtures with Crystal Palace access rather than Newcastle. And let's just touch on the budget guys before we move into the next one. And I think all 4 of these budget guys are pretty meta. Enzo is the one that I'm really liking just because his minutes are nailed. He's taking a lot of those left-sided corners and he's still box crashing attacks. So I think he's just amazing value for price, and he's away to Ipswich next, which is certainly a playable fixture. Last week, we had Morgan Rogers in at 4th, and we had Ahmad at 3rd, but Morgs is up to 3rd and Ahmad drops to the bottom. Why? Well, we've just lost back-to-back games against Wolves and Bournemouth, which is, by the way, disgraceful. Not to mention we've got no Bruno or Ugarte for Newcastle at Old Trafford on Monday night, so I definitely prefer all of the other 3 budget lads over Ahmad this game week. The striker market is very interesting at the moment. Obviously, Isak is the best option and priority buy if you do not own him. I think he's only the 5th or 6th player in Newcastle's history to score in 5 consecutive league games. So yeah, he's on a heater at the moment, absolutely insane. He tops almost every data category except for fixture rankings, which, by the way, Newcastle's fixtures aren't actually that bad across the next 5. Wolves at home and then Southampton away in this next patch. So if you don't own him, he'd be the one I'd look to buy. I've had a lot of questions about Nico Jackson. Is this the time to sell? Is Watkins worth it for free, for a hit? And after assessing all possible pathways, I seriously don't think Jackson to Watkins for free or even for a hit is worth it. Firstly, there is a serious chance now that Jackson does start that Ipswich game, which we talked about before, and it's a very good attacking fixture, very, very good attacking fixture. I'm just not comfortable advocating for a Nico Jackson sell when he's about to hit Ipswich, where there's probably a 65, 45, 65, 35% chance that he starts. If you are really hot on that move, selling Jackson, then yeah, Watkins is my favorite replacement for sure. I don't really trust anybody else, but I do think Watkins has 2 game weeks only in the power curve, maybe 3, though that's probably a stretch. Either way, the next 2 back-to-back gorgeous home fixtures, of which, by the way, he will probably be in this week's captaincy shortlist and probably in next week's one too. So you're getting differential captaincy option in the next 2, which can gain you massive points. Could be a clean 30, 35 points depending on what Watkins delivers if you choose to captain him and it goes your way, which is absolutely massive gain potential. It's a clean, guys. Nobody's got Watkins or nobody's got Foden in the top 100, top 200k, top 500k. These guys, they're not highly owned. So 1 week of captaincy can gain you a whole lot over the masses. So for him to be worth a punt, I do think you need to believe in him and you need to be willing to captain him either against Brighton or against Leicester. So otherwise, it's just not really worth it for such a short-term move. For me, I'm just going to stick with Nico, man, and I'll just pray that he starts because I can't sell him before Ipswich. It's just too good of a fixture, and now with the likelihood that he probably will start, I just think he's a hold, but definitely don't buy Jackson ahead of 19 because he could get benched. If Watkins isn't in your particular budget, then I do think the Mateta pick is worth consideration, but be warned, there's a chance he is benched for Nketiah this weekend, and his average minutes haven't been great across the last few. I do expect that to improve as well as his seasonal output, but he's much more expensive than the other Palace attackers, Sa and Eze, factoring in price and form along with Mateta's suboptimal underlyings compared to the other guys, and I'm not that confident in moving to Mateta, but if you've got a good gut feeling with him, then by all means go for it. The fixtures are there, pen share is with Mateta, and the striker market is a little thin at the moment, so he's definitely worth a punt. With the budget options, I'm not sure too much has changed. All 3 of them have been pretty stinky recently, but my advice would be not to move any of these guys around if you own them because none of their replacements around the same price look much good. If you're looking at a JP up to a Watkins or JP up to Isak, then I'd be much more comfortable in you guys doing that. But if you're just flipping João Pedro to Wood or stuff like that, I do think that's a really low ceiling transfer in terms of how many points can it really deliver you. And so I would just be sitting on whatever cheap strikers you have if you can't afford the punt on Watkins. Is Munoz in the meta? The Palace right back has amassed 4 clean sheets on top of 4 attacking returns. He's currently the 16th highest point scoring defender, and the things to like with the Munoz pick is, okay, number 1, entrant point, obviously, like we talked about with the other Palace attackers before. It's just really great. Crystal Palace have the highest clean sheet odds out of all teams this weekend at 38%, so entrance looks great. And number 2 is his attacking upside. Currently, Munoz is averaging the most XG per 90 out of all defenders. He's averaging the 4th most XGI per 90, and he's got the best minutes per XG ratio. So for just 4.7 million, you're getting one of the biggest goal threat defenders in the game right now. He's taking the 3rd most shots on target per 90. And look, Munoz isn't great from a bonus perspective, but his upside certainly offsets for those concerns. If you're in need of a defender, he's definitely the one I'd go for, especially considering Crystal Palace's fixtures are just so good up until game week 28 when they have Ipswich. So he's just a really nice medium-term, long-term hold. And do you need to rush to him? Absolutely not. Like, if you've got no need for a new defender, then there's no need to hop on. Yes, look, he's a new shiny toy, looks amazing, but sometimes you've just got to sit on your old toys in FPL and kind of bite the bullet, which is likely what I'm probably going to be doing, even though I really, really want Munoz. But if you do need a defender inside the power curve, then there's no better place to go than Danny. Looks like it's a Crystal Palace themed episode because this week's sleeper selection is a Palace defender again, Dean Henderson. He's on the higher owned spectrum in terms of differential ownership. He's sitting around 10% TSB, so right at the top end of the threshold, but 10% selection rate is still nothing out of 11 million players, and Hendo's points are still pretty low owned, guys. They're pretty low owned. I thought I'd throw in a goalkeeper because we've had 2 significant goalkeeper injuries in Flecken and Fabianski. Both injuries do look long term, and I'd recommend moving them to a cheaper option if possible. Henderson is 4.4 million and he's rising in price either today or tomorrow. So if you jump on now, you'll get almost an immediate price rise in the coming days. And obviously, the medium-term fixtures are great for Dino. He's 10th for most saves averaged per 90. He's also picked up the 7th most returns out of all goalkeepers in FPL this season, which is very, very good value. Crystal Palace's defense is sitting mid-table in terms of defensive stats. I do expect their underlyings to creep into the top 10 as these good fixtures play out. So I think it's the ideal entrance point. I'm fully of the belief that he's the best budget keeper to pick up right now, and he's a former Manchester United player, so I've always got that soft spot for Dino in my heart. If you've enjoyed this one, then smash that like button. Drop any of your personal dilemmas in the comment section below, and I'll try to get back to all of you, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Peace.